Hello and welcome. If you're new to this channel and new to the Bible, you might find it helpful to watch parts 1 and 2 of the introduction to the Bible, as well as the video about the idiom across to bear. You might also want to watch the videos Who is Jesus and the Gospel. You can find the link to these videos beneath this one. This video focuses on the idiom, a Judas kiss. This expression refers to a display or show of affection, love, or friendship by someone you know and trust, someone who secretly intends to do something to seriously harm or hurt you. As someone once said, the saddest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. The idiom Judas kiss originates from the betrayal of Jesus by Judas, one of his disciples. Judas was the group's treasurer, meaning that he was entrusted with the management of the money needed for their daily living expenses. In John chapter 12, verse 6, Judas is described as a thief who used to steal from the money bag. The betrayal of Judas was no surprise to Jesus. All of the gospel accounts include his foretelling of this event. In John chapter 6, verse 70, Jesus even called Judas a devil. This brings to mind another idiom, the devil in disguise, which might have suited Judas well. In fact, the other disciples were astounded when Jesus announced that one of them would betray him. The foretelling of the betrayal can be found in these verses. The Gospels also include the foretelling of another sad event that involved a disciple named Peter. The foretelling of Peter's denial of Jesus can be found in these verses. Here is a quick look at some of the circumstances surrounding the betrayal of one disciple and the denials of the other. The leaders in Jesus' community resented him because he challenged their religious practices. They were also envious of his fame and uncomfortable with how popular he had become because of the many miracles he performed. And also because of his revolutionary teachings that drew large crowds. Eventually, they started plotting or planning to arrest and kill him, but they feared opposition or resistance from the people who followed him. Once Judas learned that the religious leaders wanted to arrest and kill Jesus, he offered his assistance, and he was paid 30 pieces of silver for his part in the arrest. This was the typical cost of a slave or servant at the time. The betrayal and arrest of Jesus can be found in these chapters. Here are the events that preceded the arrest during the final week of Jesus' life, which many believers now refer to as Holy Week. On the day that is now called Palm Sunday, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey to observe the annual Passover celebration. His arrival on a donkey had been prophesied or foretold hundreds of years before by the prophet Zechariah. On Thursday evening, Jesus shared the Passover meal with his disciples, an event that is now referred to as the Last Supper. During the meal, Jesus washed his disciples' feet, which was his final act of service for them. Jesus also announced that he expected to be betrayed by one of them. He identified the one who would betray him and instructed him to go quickly. Judas left immediately afterward. The same evening, Jesus said that Peter would deny him 3 times that night before the rooster crowed at dawn. After supper, Jesus went with his disciples to a public garden to pray. Judas led a crowd of armed men to the garden and greeted Jesus with a kiss, identifying him as the one who should be arrested. After Jesus' arrest, the disciples scattered, just as he'd said they would, and 3 times Peter denied that he was a disciple of Jesus. Immediately after his 3rd denial, the rooster crowed. Then Peter suddenly remembered Jesus' words, and he broke down and wept bitterly. I'll return to Peter in a moment, but first, here's what happened to Jesus. After his arrest, he was tried and sentenced to crucifixion, death on a cross. The day on which Jesus died has become known as Good Friday. It's a day to reflect on his suffering and death. And these verses tell what became of Judas. Judas saw that Jesus had been sentenced to die. He felt deep shame and sadness for what he had done. So he returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders. "I have sinned," he said. "I handed over a man who is not guilty." "What do we care?" they replied. "That's your problem." So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. And that, sadly, was the tragic end of Judas. But if you're familiar with the story of Jesus' life, you already know that the crucifixion was not the end for him. His lifeless body was placed in a tomb. But he came back to life on the 3rd day after his death, just as he had told his followers several times before his arrest. The resurrection story can be found in these chapters of the New Testament. And what became of Peter? You can read about his reconciliation with Jesus in John chapter 21, verses 15 to 19. In stark contrast to what happened to Judas, Peter went on to become one of the most influential leaders of the early believers. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1, Peter referred to himself as a witness to the sufferings of Christ. Speaking to a group that included the brothers of Jesus and his mother Mary, Peter said, "Brothers and sisters, the scriptures had to be fulfilled concerning Judas, who guided those who arrested Jesus. This was predicted long ago." Evidently, Peter was much respected by the writers of the Gospels, as Matthew, Mark, and Luke placed Peter first and Judas last when listing the names of the 12 main disciples. What was the difference between the disciple who betrayed Jesus and the one who denied him? Maybe it had something to do with Peter's recognition of Jesus' true worth. Judas was concerned that he had betrayed an innocent man, but Peter was heartbroken over his denial of the one whom he had confessed as the Christ. And later, after having denied him 3 times, maybe the difference between the two men was Peter's expression of sincere regret and sorrow. 2 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 10 says, "Now this type of deep sorrow, godly sorrow, is not so much about regret, but it is about producing a change of mind and behavior, repentance, that ultimately leads to salvation. But the other type of sorrow, worldly sorrow, often is fleeting and only brings death." And here is another verse about the kind of sorrow that is acceptable to God. Possibly this was the biggest difference between Judas and Peter. Had he wanted it deeply enough, maybe Judas could have restored his relationship with Jesus too. This brings me to the end of this video. Please check out the resources in the notes beneath the video, including the library of free resources on the JesusFilm.org website, where you can find videos about Jesus in over 2,000 languages, including the Jesus Film, which tells the full story of Jesus' life. Last but not least, if you don't have a relationship with God, please click on the link, How to Start a Relationship with God, to learn how you can get started. Thank you for listening.